Assalamu alaikum. For you, my name is Abdul Qadir. I received this name while serving an 18-year prison sentence in Pelican Bay State Prison. Pelican Bay State Prison is considered to be one of the most dangerous state prisons in California, and at the age of 18, I entered there. This story starts off at the age of 13, coming from this disabled home, no father in the home. My mother struggling to do the best she could, but got caught up in the drug epidemic that was sweeping through Los Angeles, California in the 1980s, and she became a victim of that. As a result of that, me and my eldest brother had to fend for ourselves and defend our streets and what we believe was our street family, which became our gangs. I got heavily involved in gangs at the age of 13 and quickly began to incorporate that as my deen, as my life. It's still a part of my life. It's still a struggle in my life. However, while serving this 18-year sentence, which again, I want to say started at the age of 13 years old, coming out of the house looking for food, looking for clothes, shoes that fit my feet, started me off stealing, started me off robbing, started me off doing anything I could to satisfy what I believe was needs that I had in my life. Shortly thereafter, at the age of 13, me and a friend of mine decided to rob a supermarket. And in the opportunity to do this, we were in there brandishing our weapons. I had a bat, he had a gun, and there was an undercover officer inside of the place. So in this exchange, the undercover officer revealed himself, yelled out a few instructions that we didn't hear because we were heavily intoxicated. And in that missed opportunity, the officer shot me. He shot me in what they call the lower left mandible or the jaw. It took out my teeth and lodged itself in the back of my throat. Subsequently with that, my friend was killed by the officer as well. So they put me in jail for murder-robbery. They convicted me of the murder of my friend and the robbery that we was committing together. This then started me off on a prison stay, a long prison stay that extended a little beyond 18 years. And I was very upset and discontent with it. I stayed in prison under a juvenile life sentence for 3 years before me and a few friends of mine from this area, actually the Bay Area, conjured up a plan to escape. I was always ingenuitive. I was always a survivor. I was always somebody that can figure things out no matter what the circumstances was. And in our genius, we masterminded and successfully escaped from prison. And in the midst of doing that, we committed more crimes. And again, this is where the 18-year sentence in Pelican Bay began. That prison sentence ultimately challenged me because I didn't know who I was. I was suffering from what was called low self-esteem. I had no value in my life. I was always the first one to run out there and sacrifice myself, really just to prove that I was more than what my circumstances described me as. Just to speed it up a little bit, I did a rough stint in prison, fighting, arguing, politicking on the yard, constantly in trouble, as if I had a life sentence. That's why I was left out of the life conversation, because I didn't have a life sentence. I had 18 years, but the way I did my time, I did it just like they did theirs. And that got me in a lot of trouble. I spent a lot of time in what's called the segregated housing unit. It's a sensory deprivation tank that exists a mile underground in Pelican Bay. When you go into that place, you never see sunlight, natural sunlight anymore. All you hear is echoes. You live inside of a silo. You never actually feel the breeze. All you feel is the filtered air from the air conditioning. So ultimately what you are is in a sensory deprivation tank. This sensory deprivation tank for human beings becomes a slow killer. And that ultimately is where I had to stop and look at who I am and what I'm doing. There's a dark mirror in prison, and it exists not on the walls, it exists within yourself. And when I seen myself in this low state in Pelican Bay State Prison, I knew that I had some issues. I knew that I had problems. I just didn't know how to solve them. And there was no solution for me. I had no idea what Islam was, uh, outside of movies like Malcolm X and stuff like that. My family related to Christianity, although we didn't practice it. Um, Speeding the story up just a bit, I'm in prison, and now I moved out of the segregated housing unit angry because I knew a part of me was suffering, but I didn't know how to answer it. Ultimately, they transferred me down to Calipatria State Prison, which was it was a prison down in Southern California, one of the hottest prisons in Southern California. And with that heat came a lot of energy. It was what called the gang headquarters. So all the gangs converged at this one particular place, and it was a very violent and dangerous place. In this state, I had to become my worst self, which is I had to match the energy that was in that environment. Being a skinny guy, I was always familiar with weaponry and all these other different ways to defend myself. And not bragging, but I never lost a fight in there. And this state of just trying to exist without addressing my humanity ultimately led me to a breakdown in the worst way in front of the whole yard. I was up playing basketball, and the chaplain at the time was calling me over the intercom to come to the chapel and hear the news that he had. The news that he had was that my grandmother, my only active family member at the time, was she had passed away. And I knew that that was the case. I just wasn't ready to address the issue. So he comes out to the yard in his fine regalia, and he just stands there by the basketball court waiting for me to acknowledge him. And finally, out of frustration, I tell the guys, give me a break, give me a timeout. And I go speak to the chaplain. He says, hey, man, I'm sorry for interrupting you and having to address you on the yard, but your grandmother passed away. So I slap him on the shoulder. Oh, it's all right, chap. And run back out to the basketball court. So now I'm trying to play ball with the other friends of mine. And mind you, I'm the gang leader on the yard at the time. They heard the news, and I was still trying to play the game out. And they're trying to hey, man, just take a pause. Like, you don't want to sit down for a minute and digest this? So I'm like, no, man, let's just keep playing. Because, we're trained not to address our emotions. We're trained not to cry. And I was trying at that point to hold on to whatever sense of being hard I had. And I felt it waning. So I pressed the game to just continue forward until finally me and my friends, people that I had authority over, were out there fighting. They're not necessarily fighting me. They're trying to stop me. But all I see is enemy. All I see is pain and hurt. And I knew at that moment, not at that moment, but I knew then that I was having a breakdown. A breakdown is real. When your nervous system overloads you, when your mind has pressed itself to the ends of delusions and confusions and trying to distract itself from what is, that was the breaking moment for me. And when I broke, I fought the police. I fought the guys on the yard until finally they corralled me and had to literally carry me off the yard at about eight officers. This episode led me to another dark tunnel in my life, when I went into the mental health situation. In prison, mental health is not a safe place. You're dealing with criminals with mental health conditions with free reign to do whatever they want because they have no cognitive skills. In this environment, I began to understand that I do have issues, but it's not that bad. It's not really that bad, but in the instance, I began to be real. I wasn't lying to the psychologist. I wasn't trying to get medication. I wasn't manipulating the system. I was being honest. Hey, this is who I am, and this is what I've been going through. And if you have help for me, then help me. And a few doctors believed me. It was one doctor in particular, Dr. Aspinall, who took me serious. She never used to look up from her paper when she talked to me. But when I expressed to her who I was and what I was going through, she finally looked up at me and she said, nobody comes in here and is honest. Nobody comes in here seeking help. They're coming in here trying to get medication. They're trying to get a little manipulation going. And she took me serious. And in that moment, I became Dr. Aspinall's partner. We wrote a book in there, and we began to teach classes together in there. She taught me how to read and write articulately. And finally, I'm still in what they call the ad sig at the time. A brother dropped off a bunch of religious books, and one of them was the Quran. Along with this Quran was a few other little pamphlets that they had slid under the door. Some of these pamphlets had come way from Africa. And I got these pamphlets and I was just so amazed. I said, man, somebody done took the Bible and rewrote it and put it in this book. That was my mind when I first read the Quran. So I thought it was really neat the way the stories were unfolding, but I just couldn't understand all these characters and letters. But in the solitude of Asig, the Quran has a voice that can be spoken when you listen. So I began to just write out Al-Fatiha in Arabic. I ended up writing all the way up to maybe Surah 18, all over the walls, right? And when I left, I knew how to read and write Arabic. So Allah blessed me and did something that he had never done. He had put me on what was called the honor yard and moved me to Lancaster State Prison. And that was when the transition to Islam began. I came looking for somebody that I heard who was a sheikh on the yard. And when he speaks, he rolls his eyes in the back of his head. I said, man, I want to meet that dude. I want to know what is he looking at when he goes into this head. And believe it or not, it was this brother right here. It was this brother right here. He may still do it. I catch him every now and then when he's in deep thought, rolling his eyes in the back of his head. But his name was Shakir. And they said that this brother would be able to decode some of the things that I had scribbled on pamphlets and papers and things. And I literally had scrolls that I had rolled up and taped down with Apple stickers, you know, those stickers off the Apple. So I had a bunch of scrolls and I said, man, if this brother can understand this, then maybe this religion might have some teeth. It might be real. So it took a couple of days because this brother was in a building wherein they was running a dog program. It was a rehabilitative program wherein they was introducing something, and this brother was instrumental in that program, introducing it to that prison. Long story short, it took about 3 or 4 days to get the brother out. I'm not sure he thought I was Majnun because I just came from the situation, but it took him a few days. And when he finally came out, he said, brother, I heard you've been looking for me. I was right in front of the building. I said, yes, sir. It was pretty cold out there. I remember that day. And I said, brother, I just wanted to show you something. I want you to look at it. And what I showed him was, in my mind, I say it's Disney, right? Because I draw things out that I see in words. And I gave him a picture of what I had seen regarding the Nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he, in that instance, expanded his light and he broke it into these different stages and steps as he began to evolve into the final completion. And when the brother seen it, he said, where did you get this from? I said, brother, I wrote it. No, you didn't. Bro, I wrote it. He said, brother, meet me in the chapel tomorrow. And that was when Islam began to manifest. And finally, the final link was Brother Jesse. Jesse was an anomaly. You know, he came out of nowhere. Big heavy set brother. You know, he comes in there and he has this methodology that he wants to introduce to us. And he has this booklet, the Wirdu Am. The Wirdu Am. And just the name in and of itself, weird. Yeah, they call me weird all the time. What does that mean? So it's just, I love to break things down. And when he gave it to me, we got this book. And I believe it was me and this brother here, Sahih. We began to dissect it piece by piece. Brother said whoever wins it, whoever memorizes it first, it was some kind of reward or something like that. And I think I was the first to memorize it. And that dhikr, in and of itself, sending prayers and peace upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, going through the filters of Astaghfirullah, and then finally coming to the throne of Allah, La ilaha illallah. It was a purifying method in it, and it was a song. It was a rhythm that set off a different frequency that began to change structures, change outcomes within how I perceive life. And these are things that was happening instantaneously. It didn't need an argument. It didn't need conviction. It was real. And in that sense, Islam now has become a real thing in my life. Today, I'm currently working after 6 years of being free from incarceration as a community intervention worker. I work within the West Angeles area of Los Angeles, California. We work with some of the hardest hit areas amongst some of the hardest to deal with individuals. These are gang members, Crips, Bloods, and what have you. And we've been dealing with them intently, resourcing them, getting them to educational programs with these youngsters. We're running gardening, we're running art, music, physical education. We have created the reality in which we dreamed of inside that prison. And the miracle continues as I'm sitting before you all. And this is where the journey continues. And I just thank you all. My name is Abdul Qadir. This is a journey that needs all support, even if it's just a rub on the back, or as this man gave me a hug on the yard and let me know that love was real. Assalamu alaikum.